Welcome to the QB Chronicles, an SMU Football Podcast with Garrett, Gilbert, and Kyle Padron. Join former SMU quarterbacks Garrett and Kyle as they break down each week's game, offering insights from their own experiences on the field. In addition to game analysis, we'll also bring you special episodes featuring interviews with past and present SMU players, sharing their stories and perspectives. Whether you're a diehard Mustang fan or just love football, this podcast is your go-to source for all things SMU football. Pony up!
Welcome back to the QB Chronicles. I'm Kyle Padron, as always, joined by fellow SMU quarterback Garrett Gilbert. And we have a very special guest today for our Letterman Session series. He played quarterback from 1989 to 1991 on the Hilltop. He joins us from New York City, Mike Romo.
Hey, guys.
Mike, thanks for being with us.
Great. Man, love being with you guys. Big fan of watching you guys on the Hilltop as well. So good to connect.
Thanks for coming on, man.
Yeah, we're going to jump right in. Mike, you and I have met on a couple of occasions and came and sat in your office recently, but would love to just have you share your early years prior to being at SMU. Talk through your childhood, your family dynamics, and just share your recruiting story, where you went to high school, and how you got to SMU. There's some cool stories and articles about you and being the first signee after the death penalty, but would love to just hear your story from the early days.
Yeah, no, happy to do it. Funny, I never really thought I'd play college football. I grew up in San Antonio, went to San Antonio Roosevelt, had a good program. We were 5A. I think they're 6A now, but it was a bigger program. We had, our rivals were San Antonio Churchill. I played against a guy named Alex Van Pelt, who played, famously played for the Bills for a long time. He might have been,
Alex actually coached me in Cleveland.
No way.
Small world.
Awesome. Well, the next time you talk to him, ask him why he was second team all district and not.
Absolutely. Might shoot him a text right after this.
Yeah, he got the last laugh though. He had a great career, and he moved from Pennsylvania to play in San Antonio, which was good. Before he went back and started for 4 years at Pitt. But yeah, I grew up in San Antonio. We had a great running back that was a year older than me, and A&M was tracking him. His name was Walker May. Unbelievable. He was an anchor on the 4x100 meter relay team. My high school had one of the finalists that went to state. So we had some guys that could fly. But oddly enough, we ran the option, and I never really threw the ball. I knew nothing about reading a defense or any of that. I mean, it was, dive, fake the dive. And if you'd see me run, you'd be like, man, make this guy throw the ball. Because I was slower than watching paint dry. But we had this old school coach, and we ran the option. That's what we did. And, we had a good senior year. It was a little bit of a Friday night lights story. So my junior year, we were 8-2, and we just missed the playoffs. And then my senior year, we were 6-0, number one team in San Antonio, top 10 in the state. Looked like everything was tracking. A&M had actually offered me a full ride before my senior year. The guy that had recruited my older brother into Texas A&I was at UT, so I wanted to follow. I wanted to be Garrett Gilbert before he went there. Gatorade All-American, but I was. Had an offer to go play at UT for baseball and football. I was actually probably a better baseball player than football player. And then lo and behold, I tore my ACL in the sixth game. And so missed the rest of the season. I actually played basketball and football and baseball. That was actually a 3-year Letterman. So, back in the old days when you could do a variety of sports. So I ended up missing the rest of my senior year in football, and I missed all the baseball season. So I was kind of done in terms of playing football. And then I started getting some calls. Like Rice gave me a call and recruited me, and I got appointments to all 3 academies. So I started thinking about that. And then Forrest Gregg called me and said, "Hey, Mike, look, we've watched your tape. We think you're pretty good. You could, we're out for a year. You're out for a year. Why don't you come up here, rehab, and let's just see how things go." And honestly, when he called, I was like, wow, living legend, SMU legend, at that point, I was so disappointed because I wanted to play in the Southwest Conference. I wanted to, at the time, it was the premier conference in the U.S., long before the SEC rose to prominence and others, but arguably it was, the best conference. And so, I ended up signing. Funny enough, I wasn't, there was no intent to be the first signee. My sister-in-law, who used to, she just retired. She was the CFO for Southwest Airlines. She had to go to work that morning and she had to go early. She's like, hey, I can drop you off at the stadium, but I can't wait for you. So I just got dropped off on the curb 10 minutes before the office opened. So it was just, in good PR fashion, the Dallas Morning News saw that and they ran with the story like I was this big, eager beaver. And the truth is, there was no Uber. That was my only ride to the stadium. So I was just the first one there. And it was funny because Forrest walks up and he's like, hey, Mike, I can't talk to you. They were so nervous about any kind of rules and infractions. He literally is like, I can't talk to you. I'll see you at 8:00 when we open the doors. So that's the big reveal on how I was the first person to sign. That was my only ride that I had to the stadium.
That's pretty funny.
That is funny.
Now you get to SMU, of course, and obviously, things are, pretty chaotic. I'm sure everyone's tiptoeing around. This is potentially a silly question, but did SMU still have baseball? Did you still have any plans on playing baseball, or was that kind of out of the, in the rearview mirror at that point?
They had a club team, but didn't have a team to play in the Southwest Conference. So those dreams were dashed. I really wanted to be a two-sport athlete in college, and I was pretty highly recruited, and more recruited in baseball than I was in football until our running back got spotted by A&M, and so then I started getting on the radar. And honestly, it was a free for all. People saw the 30 for 30. We had grand total of 15 scholarship players the first year, and everyone else, the rest of the team were walk-on. So it was very much a ragtag operation, but we had an outstanding coaching staff, starting with Forrest Gregg. Tom Rossley was our offensive coordinator. He had, famously coached Gordy Lockbaum at Holy Cross, for any listener that remembers that name. But he was a two-way player and was a Heisman candidate. And then he went on to Green Bay and led far to a lot of great years, along with Coach Mike Sherman. And then we had Coach Lewis, who was our defensive coordinator. He went on to be the defensive coordinator for the New York Giants. We had Dale Lindsey. He went on to coach the Chargers. So we had some really great coaches that Forrest brought in, and we were young, we were small. The academic standards, they were just so hyper focused on bringing a new regime, student athletes, and you had to be fully vetted before you could even take a recruiting trip. So at the time, it was just recruiting a different kind of player, and there was a big emphasis on student athletes. And so, the people that were able to get into SMU at the time had to have had to come and, have good SAT scores, but, smart kids and, highly motivated, first class. And then the second year we got 25 more scholarships, but we had 40 scholarships compared to everyone else that had 95. And, I'll remind you, this was the Barry Bonds era. People were getting very large foreheads that couldn't fit their heads into helmets at just about every school we played against. And we were routinely drug tested. I mean, we were the cleanest program on the planet of any sport of any kind.
So not only you guys are, fighting an uphill battle in terms of scholarship athletes, but I mean, it's almost like, obviously, SMU just fresh off the death penalty, compliance wise, was doing, again, walking on eggshells, tiptoeing around. So it's the rules, but you're realistically, everyone else was doing it. You're playing at a disadvantage there as well, huh?
Yeah, huge disadvantage. So, the first year we played 1989, we had 40 scholarship players again in the Southwest Conference. And the very first year we played 5 teams that were in the top 20. They didn't have They didn't go up to the top 25 like they do today. So UT, A&M, Baylor, Houston, and then on the non-conference schedule, we went and played at Notre Dame, and they were number 1 in the nation. And their 3 running backs were Jerome Bettis, Dorsey Levens, and Ricky Waters. Those were the 3 guys that rotated in, and they were just running up and down the field. And they had a guy, Stance Magala, got first-round draft pick by the Cowboys. I mean, we played an NFL team, and pretty much it was like that every week. I mean, Andre Ware won the Heisman. And Klingler was his backup. So, when they were just, slinging the ball, I mean, every week we played. Baylor had probably the top 3 defense in the nation. They were just stacked. TCU was good. Everybody was good. And here we are rolling out. And, fortunately, we stayed somewhat healthy. And, we could scheme with people for a good half. I mean, given the great coaching we had, given the smart players that we had, we could always match up well with people for a half. But by the second half, we had zero depth.
We talked through, obviously, some of the challenges that team faced in 1989, but I have to imagine with 15 scholarship guys or, whatever the number was there, the ability to go get 2 victories against UConn and North Texas had to be even sweeter. Tell us about those games and maybe the locker room afterwards.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think there was this team was built on a huge amount of grit, and people were just very determined. And, I think week in and week out, we were extremely well prepared. The physical disadvantage that we had and the lack of depth was really the thing that held us back initially. And so offensively, I think we ended up number 5 in the nation in passing yards, some of it because we were playing from behind, but schematically, we could match up with people and we could compete. But by the second half, people that had, 4th or 5th year offense and defense alignment, that's where the games are won and lost, and we would just get worn down. So the first game we played, I mean, it was just deer in the headlights. We played Rice, and a lot of people hadn't played a game in 2 years. And so the game was so fast, and, we were just a little shell-shocked. But, they always talk about how much improvement happens from week 1 to week 2. And we just got ready for that next game. We found our footing. Connecticut came to town. They were, I don't know if they were the top team, but they were one of the top ranked teams in 1AA. And so they were a very good team, very well coached. And, we were down 30-13 with 5 minutes left in the game. And they just kind of took the shackles off. We went straight 2-minute offense. We got an onside kick. And, famously came back and won on the last play of the game. And, that created the miracle on Mockingbird. And that created a huge amount of confidence in one another, continued to make the team bond and believe that we could do things. And, and then we went through, and then we had the game against Houston where, they had, Andre Ware won the Heisman, and then Klingler was the backup. So for whatever reason, they wanted to just continue to throw the ball against us that day, which, is still, leaves a bad taste in the mouth. But we came back our, senior year and beat them 41-16. So we did get some revenge on that. And, so people were pretty down, but, honestly, no one really, ever quit that season. And so the North Texas game was that very next week. And we went out and we took care of business, and we won, I think 35-6. And I think we won even more decisively. So that was a great victory. And then, we ran into Baylor, and we ran into some other teams that, that were just way more, stronger and just better than we were. But by the last game of the season, we went up to Arkansas. They won the Southwest Conference that year, and we actually went ahead in the 4th quarter, and it was deafening silence in Fayetteville or Little Rock. I can't remember where we played, but yeah, we went up and it was dead quiet. And then, we basically got a huge dose of Barry Foster, who played for the Steelers, for the last 5 minutes of the game, and they took us down because we just couldn't hold them back. But man, that was a great feeling because here we are playing with the Southwest Conference champs in the last game of the season. It just gave us such huge confidence going into the second season. So yeah, I mean, I think we exceeded all, everybody's expectations of what we could accomplish. And, we were proud of what we were able to do. And, it was, we defied a lot of odds and very, very proud of what we were able to do in that first year.
Yeah. You talked about just the roster filled with, the type of guys that were brought in, probably high performers in high school, but, on the field and academically. And then the grit that you all, played with. Naturally, as a quarterback, you step into a leadership position. You were, I guess a freshman in '89. What was the locker room like? Obviously, tough season from just, purely looking at the, overall standings and the record for the year. But week to week, what was it like, having that leadership role and trying to get prepped every week? Just the emotional toll of the season and, going in the Houston game, y'all responded well the following week at UNT. But what was that like for you? And then as, basically the entire team in the locker room, understanding that, the lack of scholarships and, you're stepping in that leadership role as a young guy. I think Garrett and I both, have some familiarity with that, but would love to just hear kind of the locker room vibe and, how y'all prepped each week, knowing that y'all were at a disadvantage and likely, I don't know if they did Vegas odds back then, but probably weren't favored in most of those games. But just curious, the locker room dynamic and how y'all prepped each week.
Yeah, look, I think everyone just had each other's back. I mean, team sports is the ultimate. And I think, nobody until you're in the trenches and you're going through that big of a challenge, that much adversity, no one can really understand or appreciate what it is to be on a team and play for each other. And that was the thing. The character of the guys that I played with was just off the charts. And nobody wanted to let one another down. Our coaches always believed there was always a sense of can-do attitude. And, there was never this woe is me or, we felt disadvantaged. Every week was a challenge. Like, let's see if we can push this into the third quarter. Let's see if we can push this in. And, as we finished in the Arkansas game, it just proved that we belonged way sooner than anybody thought. And it just, it proved, so, at the quarterback level, processing speed is everything. And I just, for myself and for, we were running the run and shoot, which was still new, it was a newer offense in the country. And, you have 4 receivers that are running 4 different options on any play. So you have 20 different routes. And so just trying to get that continuity week to week and getting the anticipation and figuring out what the defense is doing and ultimately, adjusting to blitzes and, because we weren't as strong up front, we couldn't really establish the running game on a consistent basis. So most defenses knew they were just going to pin their ears back and come after us. And, that was the best way to stop us. And A&M showed back then when they beat Houston by just blitzing like crazy, kind of the Chicago Bears zero defense, they were just coming at you. And so, we had to adjust. We had to get rid of the ball, but it was really preparation and understanding, and as mentioned in high school, we ran the option and I didn't know anything about reading a defense and cover 0, cover 2. Yeah. All of that was foreign to me. And we were just learning on the job, but we had fun. I mean, I guess to some extent we were able to play loose because the expectations were not very high. And, so I think that gave people a little more comfort level, like, let's just go see what we can do and just let it fly.
Love it.
Yeah, no doubt. Talk to us a little bit about, obviously we can, would dive in a little more to the following seasons, but would you say that Miracle on Mockingbird would be, top of the list in terms of favorite memories, or were there others? I mean, I think being involved in a program during that time comes with so much extra baggage. And so maybe your favorite moment isn't even a victory. It's just being able to fight every day with those guys. But, talk to us about some favorite moments during your time there at SMU.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the second season, I mean, what was also challenging for us in 3 years, we had 3 different offensive coordinators. So we were constantly in
Garrett knows how that goes.
mode. Forrest Gregg got elevated. They made him choose between being the athletic director and the head coach. And so he resigned from being the head coach. And so the second year, we had a new offensive coordinator. Tom Rossley got recruited. He went over and was coaching with Jerry Glanville for the Falcons. And so we had to start over, and, we had a guy come in and he wanted to do things differently. And we kind of, even though it was a similar offense, it was very different. And we had to all kind of learn different things, different, line calls. And so it was kind of a reboot, which was tough. I mean, we came out on fire. We played Vanderbilt, and we beat them, I think 44-7, had 6 touchdown passes. I mean, they played zone. They didn't adjust the whole game. It was kind of playing 7-on-7. It was a dream game where they just didn't make the adjustments. And I think what ended up happening is it kind of tuned people into, like, you can't lay down on these guys. And people from there on the rest of the season, people showed up. They played full on. They were prepared for us. So there was no kind of catching people, taking us lightly. And then the second year, we ended up getting a lot of injuries. The first year, we were lucky. We stayed really healthy that first season, which, really helped us. But that second season, man, we had a lot of guys go down with ACLs and shoulders. And so we went from little depth to even less. And so we ended up losing the next 10 games. And the morale was down. And it was just one of those things where you couldn't catch a break. The time, the 50-50 balls we weren't getting, that was a season where everything seemed to go against us. And, we just, it was a tough season. But I mean, the Vandy game was certainly a highlight. Beyond that, tough to find, a lot of comfort. I mean, we're all competitive. You don't step on the field with anything less than the expectation of winning. Right. I had never been, on a team that, lost 10 games in a row. So that was, that was tough on morale. It was tough on the psyche of the team. And then, after that season, they ended up bringing Rossley back for our junior year, or the third year. And so there was a shot of confidence again that we were, things were going to be on the rise. And so then we, kind of, started back over on that. And then, my third year, we opened with Arkansas. We didn't play very well. I didn't play very well, unfortunately. We had a lot of young guys. We had a bunch of freshman receivers. I mean, we were just kind of learning each other. It was a third year, but it felt like the first year all over again. Yeah. And then so that was tough. And then the next game we lost to Vanderbilt. I almost pitched a perfect game. I had one pick six on a disguise coverage, and the guy took it back, and it was just so heartbreaking to have that happen because we were getting graded, and I did every read right except for that one, but that's the one we all remember. It's the one that stung. And then my third game we played Baylor, and I ended up blowing my other ACL out. So that was sort of the end of the end. So I played the first half of my career on one torn ACL with a brace, which was silly. They would never do that today, given the the advancement of surgery and technology and rehab. But I was playing on a flat tire for the whole time, and then I ended up tearing my other ACL. So that was the end. And I did try to rehab, try to look to come back because I wanted to finish with my teammates and have that opportunity. And then I ultimately retore my ACL when I was doing physical therapy. So it wasn't meant to be. I studied, I focused on my grades. I got a finance degree. I graduated in 4 years, and it went from not thinking I'd ever play in college to having the privilege of playing for 2.5 years and helping lead SMU back, and and then seeing what's happened through you guys playing, and and then this past year going to the college football playoff. It's finally this sense of validation that we've all been kind of stepping stones to helping get this program back to where it belongs.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that's you kind of led us where I was going to go next, but just, number one, how are your knees doing these days?
Pretty steady. I got to put the fork down a lot more often than I want, because you got to keep the weight down. And, I try and stay active. That's the key. Just got to keep the strength up. And, but fortunately, okay. I mean, I've had a couple more scopes since then, but playing on AstroTurf, it's just a bunch of stuff. I've got ligaments in my ankle. Both my elbows are kind of jacked up. My rotator cuff is torn. Throwing wet footballs and doing. Those injuries do catch up, and so people ask me all the time. We have 3 daughters. Like, would you ever let your son play football? I'm like, I don't know. That's a tough call.
Yeah.
I hear you. So, I mean, just talk about, you kind of touched on this, but like, how much fun is it to watch SMU where the program has come to now and gotten to this point and being a part of the national conversation again, like it was just like SMU was just before you got there. Were you able to get to any games last year and just touch on the excitement that's, going on around the program?
I am one of the biggest SMU cheerleaders you'll ever meet. Just the experience, the people, the friendships. SMU's been nothing but great for me, and just everything that I've done and where it's led me in life. I mean, a good friend of mine, Roy Bailey, was a guy who hired me into New York, and that's how we ended up coming to New York. And I come here and you meet guys like John Phelan, who was running MSD Capital. He was an SMU alum, and it's the Pony Nation is very, very strong, and I've always bragged and been very proud to be part of the SMU alumni network. And anytime someone asks me for help that's an SMU alum, I'll almost always do it. And so it's funny because in New York, the intensity for academic excellence and going to Ivy League schools is the equivalent of Texas football. The expectations of parents, the tutors, the training, and it's Ivy League or top 20 or bust academically. And so when I talk about SMU as being a great spot for people to go to school, for the longest time it never really got its due. But part of it was, they sort of missed out on the conference, being in a great conference. And so I think for a long time it was tougher to, recruit consistently. We saw where TCU went. They really rode the ascent of being in the Big 12 and being able to recruit and being one of the, the go-to programs in Texas. And so, I think being in the ACC just really put SMU back into the national prominence, and where I think we all know it belongs, and it just wasn't really getting its due or respect for a long time. But this was just validation of where I believe SMU belongs, where I think they should consistently be in the college football playoff. Just in recruiting in Texas, recruiting in Dallas Fort Worth, there's so much talent that you can have there. And it's, bringing them to the hilltop and letting them go is just, that's what it's all about. So I couldn't have been more proud to see what the program did this year. Bringing in a new president from UT is such a coup. Bringing in, and I was in the Cox School of Business, and hiring somebody from WashU, where my daughter went to school, which is a, extremely good academic school. I mean, what they're doing and what they're building is extremely exciting, and it's part of the reason I wanted to be back in Dallas. We moved to Dallas a couple of years ago, and watching the growth and everything that's happening in Dallas, and SMU's at the center of that.
Yep. Yeah, Mike, tell us a little bit about what you're doing now. You mentioned earlier that you spent 16 years up in New York, back in Dallas the last couple of years, but on a professional level, what is it you're doing now? And, maybe how is, you mentioned a couple of names earlier, getting you into the business, but, how is SMU kind of giving you a platform and a foundation for what you're doing now?
Yeah, look, SMU just has such an incredible network, and, it's kind of led from one opportunity to another. I'm in real estate private equity. I'm with a group called Acor Capital, and funny enough, the way I ended up here was one of the founders, his daughter went to SMU. So I was in Australia, and we were having dinner, and he was talking about his daughter having an interest in working, in New York, and I literally said, I'm happy to help her. I know, she wanted to get into, meet some people at NBC. I had some connections there. And then he called me back. He's like, hey, I thought that was really great that you were willing to help my daughter. I was competing with them. And he said, hey, we'd love to have you join our team and come over and meet the partners and see. And so, my focus for the last 20 years has been raising real estate raising private equity capital focused on the real estate sector in the U.S. And so, I've been able to, really, establish networks, throughout the U.S., Israel, the Gulf, Asia. And so that's really my focus. And it's really a lot of that same kind of work ethic and tenacity of what we do when we get under center. What plays are we calling? What are we doing? And got to focus on process, got to have discipline. And so I've been doing that. And I enjoy it. I enjoy, putting capital in the hands of really smart investment people and building out great portfolios that, and it benefits, different, teachers and police and fire and all kinds of constituents that, want to get exposure to, real estate private equity. So, that's what I've been doing for the last couple decades.
Awesome. That's awesome. You got anything else, KP?
No, Mike, we really appreciate your time, and I hope our listeners enjoy this as well. I think, you laid, and, being one of the first quarterbacks after the death penalty certainly laid the foundation for guys like myself, Garrett, and this long lineage of quarterbacks ever since then. But in the program itself, we're grateful for your time and for your contributions to SMU, and look forward to following along. And hopefully you're back in Dallas in the fall, and we'll see you on the Hilltop for some games, and we can check out the Boulevard together and find ourselves in the Weber End Zone Complex taking in some game time.
Well, you can count on that, man. Let's get the old quarterback crew together, and
we need to
watch the ponies rise up, continue to rise.
No doubt. Thanks, Mike. We appreciate you.
Yeah, appreciate you. Thanks for having me.